Well, hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Shed of Knowledge. It's been over a year since I've done one of these things. I've been a busy beaver. I've done some plays. I've done some movies. I've been kind of busy in that respect, and I'm changing jobs. I'm changing my whole life around. I'm even changing around the Shed of Knowledge, which why we have the Titanic behind me hiding the bookshelves because they're in such disarray that I just can't have them on television. But I have to do another something interesting. This is so great for me, and I know there's only a few people that watch this, but I like to feel like you guys enjoy it too. So anyway, here we are sitting together again in the Shed of Knowledge, and I'm so glad to be here. I am John the Storyteller, and I'm going to tell you a story about something interesting, which is why we call it something interesting. Usually something from history, or modern anomalies, something odd that's kind of fantastic but true. I like to research things and make sure that they are true. I think the first few ones I just sort of, spouted off the top of my head, but now I kind of wish I could go back, and there's a couple little things, just very minor things that I'd like to tweak on some of those earlier ones, and maybe I could just put a little thing at the bottom. It's like, oh no, this is, this date was wrong, or because I was just spouting everything off. But I am going to talk to you about something that is really interesting from American history. And for those of you Americans, we've had it beat into our head that there are 50 states in America. And of course, that is absolutely true. There's American territories like Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and Guam that are not states, but are American territories, but there are 50 actual states. Now, if I were to tell you that there was a state in history that has come and gone, would you believe me? Well, of course you would, because I'm John the Storyteller. But if the guy on the street told you that, like my uncle told me, I really would give it pause. My uncle told me about the United States that came and went. And if I were to ask you what the 14th state past the 13 colonies is, you would either say, well, I don't know, because who knows that. But if you were really, really on the ball, you would say Vermont. Well, you're right, but you almost weren't, because there was a State of the Union that was created in 1784. This is after the American independence, that came and went. And this is the state of Franklin. That's a familiar name, isn't it? Well, it didn't start out as Franklin. It started out as Frankland. And then they changed it to Franklin to kind of get Benjamin Franklin on board. They wrote to Benjamin Franklin and asked him to come and give validity to the state. And he said, well, I've been in Europe all this time. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what the plan is for, or I don't know what is going on, but please keep me apprised if I can be of assistance. It's a little bit of a blow off, which is fine, because the state of Franklin was. Here's another thing that's fairly interesting. We talk about the Civil War, and the states seceded from the Union. All the southern states eventually seceded from the Union, starting with Georgia and ending with North Carolina. I live in North Carolina. Seceded from the Union. And that is not the first time that has occurred. The state of Franklin seceded from North Carolina. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. So let me just start off with the establishment of the state of Franklin. The state of Franklin started out in Jonesboro in 1784 as a provisional capital. It became kind of a busy center west of the Appalachians, and so this Washington district area was an independent area and wanted to become their own, kind of entity. They were tired of North Carolina governing them. Now, the state of Franklin is located in what is now eastern Tennessee. But after the Revolutionary War, North Carolina was kind of granted all the land as far as it would go. We didn't really know how far it would go. So Lewis and Clark was a few years off, but basically across the country was North Carolina, and so this little area is what is now Tennessee started becoming more and more independent minded, and they didn't like the fact that North Carolina had courts, and North Carolina was supposed to protect them, and North Carolina was supposed to tax them, and all these other parts. They didn't feel like they were part of North Carolina. So what North Carolina did, this is interesting too. So there's a difference between cession and secession. Cession is whenever you voluntarily give your land or something like that to somebody else. And so North Carolina ceded, that's with a C, not like seeds, ceded the Washington district to the federal government. The idea being maybe that they would do with it as they will. Well, the federal government did not act on the ceding of the Washington district, and so it was rescinded. And all of a sudden, these people in the Washington district that were thinking, oh, I thought we were going to get, our chance to be independent, and now we're not getting it, kind of we're angry about it. And so they seceded from North Carolina. So North Carolina, before it seceded from the Union, had an area secede from it. So, I mean, we're talking about a young country here. This is 1784, 1776 being the big American Revolution. America not being a true entity until a few years after it was even after that the American Declaration of Independence was signed by everybody. Not everybody signed at the same time. We all look at the signatures and we see everybody's signatures, but they didn't all sign at the same time. They all signed in a little bit of their own different time. Anyway, so this started in Jonesboro. Then in 1785, after the secession, the secession was in August 1784, but in 1785, after the secession, it moved to Greenville, Franklin, now Greenville, Tennessee. But here's something interesting, an aside note. There are some famous people, one particularly. I mean, you have to get deep into it. There's attorneys, and John Sevier, who's was the governor of the state of Franklin, and blah blah blah. But there is one very famous individual who was born in Greenville, Greene County, Franklin. And this was when it was Franklin. In 1786, Davy Crockett was born in Franklin. So if we had birth certificates back there, I guess he'd have to put FN or whatever the abbreviation for Franklin would be. But Davy Crockett was born in the state of Franklin in 1786. Incidentally, did I mention that the state of Franklin existed from 1784 until 17... hang on, let me look at my thing. Finally, I'm going to say 1788 to be safe. In 1787, it really started falling apart. Franklin declared themselves in 1785. This was in 1788. North Carolina took Franklin back over by force. There was North Carolina brought in troops. They were like, okay, we're tired of this. This is not working out. North Carolina brought in troops, and they had a little fight. 3 people were killed, and other people were wounded in this little fight that ended the state of Franklin. It was kind of over by then. But during the course of the history of the state of Franklin, they set up courts. They did treaties with the Indians. They did, a number of things that an independent state would do. So it's not like just a bunch of drunks got together and started a state. Franklin was 8 counties. It was 8 counties in, what is now Tennessee. It was a really kind of a big deal. And it almost became the 14th state of the Union. 7 states of the 13 voted to allow Franklin to become a state. So you almost, if you live in Tennessee, Eastern Tennessee anyway, you almost live in Franklin. But there was a 2/3 majority required. That was a majority, but there's a 2/3 majority required to bring a state in, and North Carolina was pissed off at them anyway, so it ended up not happening. But 1780 they had a little fight and got over it. One of the things that changed Franklin's minds, not just the active aggression, that's not the right word, the little fight with North Carolina and North Carolina's troops. By the way, it wasn't like North Carolina brought in troops and then all of a sudden they had a big fight and it was over. North Carolina brought in troops to establish courts and governance in the state of Franklin. So that lasted for a little while. But then finally everything came to a head and they got into a little fight. So in 1787, that's when the fight was. 1788, Franklin was disbanded and was ceded back to North Carolina, I think. But I do know that in 1790, what was the remnants of the state of Franklin became part of the Southwest Territory. And then in 1796, finally, the 16th state was established, the glorious state of Tennessee. And it's the state that you know and love today that incorporates what was almost the 14th state, the state of Franklin. Thank you for tuning in. I'm John the Storyteller, and this is Something Interesting.